So, the inevitable Blade Runner 2049 piece. What do we make of this one? First of all, yes, I prefer the world where there is still just one sacred Blade Runner, one film which we ponder the mysteries of for years to come, and only sought out and discussed by those who were truly interested, not well known enough for the more foolish and or manipulative to posture with. But times change, obviously. It isn't 2007 anymore, and as exciting as it was to feel like I was in on something special when I first rented and watched for DVD of that Harrison Ford movie from the IMDb Top 250, and then examined the Wikipedia article afterward, yeah. Social media now reigns supreme, and there isn't any easy way of reversing the damage which it has done. So now they figured they could make money off of Blade Runner 2049, and they didn't even do that, so what did they do? What was the point? It was a commercial flop, according to sources. To their credit, they got Hampton Fancher back, but that didn't quite capture the magic. Why? Because Hampton Fancher didn't insert shots of the unicorn sourced from legend. It was Ridley Scott who elevated that screenplay. Rehiring Fancher was no guarantee of reconjuring that same ethereal magic of the initial picture from 1992. So what have we got? What if there was a child between Deckard and Rachel? A replicant baby, it becomes the focus of the Blade Runner sequel. I'm going to read out a passage from one of the novelized sequels to the Blade Runner film, the fourth and final of them, Iron Talon. And before we do that, yes, this is a rather fantastic film in its own right, but it is no Blade Runner. It is not truly a worthwhile follow-up to the first film, really, as I would have dreamt it. And I'm trying to be a spoiled little twit and explain why that is, and while still believing sincerely that this film is excellent as a standalone epilogue to Blade Runner's synopsis and a continuation of its fictional universe. Now that that is out of the way, let's acknowledge our discontent. That passage from Blade Runner 4, Iron Talon. Well, rather a plot summary via Wikipedia which details the final moments of the novel. This paragraph. A moment later, she sees Scrappy, the lost owl, flying over to perch on another man's elbow. Approaching him, she recognizes him as the Blade Runner Rick Deckard, accompanied by the child Rachel. He admits that it was he who took the owl from her apartment, and that if he had not done so, she would now be dead. Iris asks if he will take her back to LA, and the child Rachel interrupts, saying that she cannot go back to LA because she's never been there in the first place. Iris is confused, and Deckard points upwards, remarking that those aren't the stars you see from Earth. Iris, Deckard, and Rachel depart in Deckard's spinner. Blade Runner begins as a story which questions the nature of humanity as a spiritual facade, and ends with Deckard questioning reality itself, overwrought at the prospect that a dream motif has dropped into the waking world via an external monitor of his brain, his memories, or because the engineering of experienced reality is far stranger than is comfortable considering. Blade Runner 2049 is still content to question what separates a replicant from a human. Did a replicant need to have a child in order for us to consider them human? I was fine with Roy's monologue myself. It almost undermines the intended power of the speech, frankly. And aesthetics, hey, I love the look of this film, but isn't this just proof that digital and live action don't mix as well as live action as far as VFX world building goes? This is where Ghost in the Shell and Mamoru Oshii have it right. It is time to go all in or go home, alright? Oh, and this might not be a fair example. 2004 was much closer to 1995 than 2017 to 1982/92. But Ghost in the Shell 2, and even the same director, though consider both Ridley Scott and Hampton Fancher's involvement with 2049, Ghost in the Shell 2 managed to not only act as a worthwhile sequel to its original, but its superior and potentially the single most interesting film of the 2000s. But yes, the CGI abundance in 2049 at this point, it may as well all be animated. It will never look as exciting or impressive, original, fresh, timeless as the original film. Don't even try. Still, absolutely love the look of the film, but I cannot help but compare the film to a dead spouse, so to speak. Okay, grim comparison, but how else can I illustrate the bizarre reaction that is responding with disappointment to the spectacular visual accomplishments of Blade Runner 2049? Not dreamlike enough, although sometimes it is. Too focused on building the world and explaining everything for the plot hole hungry internet, not enough mystery, a few too many speeches, the tone of the original is partially lost. Blade Runner is no longer weird fiction with 2049, but closer to hard, realistic, consistent in-universe realism and aggressively logical for the plot hole hungry, fascistic and literal internet posters. Hell, the right director of the Blade Runner sequel / follow-up may actually have been Gosling's buddy Nicholas Winding Refn. Or Christopher Boe, because why not? No, really, Denis Villeneuve did a magnificent job. I just find his style, and Alex Garland's, it is very similar. To be so chrome, sleek, trying to be modern, airtight, believable and logical, all substance, no surface, as I once claimed about his Dune adaptation. While I adore Denis' works, his recent science fiction endeavours, as Alex Garland's have, feel so professional visually, so professional, sheen, and very Silicon Valley aesthetically, perfect to the point of being manicured to an unidentifiable, generic, formulaic blur. There is no character or charisma by comparison to the science fiction prior to the 2010s, it could be speculated. Okay, but otherwise, the film is just stellar. Ryan Gosling's Kay is a far more interesting character than he had almost any right to be, a replicant who questions whether implanted memories are so, and revels in the eventual emotional disassembly of his functional brain. Love is a fascinating replicant worthy of the original's four renegades, one who begins to also relish in an emotional rush, and apparently effectively hides it from her master. When she attempts to survive as Kay tries to drown her, for goodness sake, I feel just very moved by her plight. She wants to know where the child is. She probably has the same intentions, though of the wrong faction, certainly, as the replicant resistance which earlier rescued Kay after the attack from Wallace's soldiers. She believes in the replicants' right to be humans as well. That's why she wants the child to be found. The holographic joy, maybe it was just trying to function as well as its programming wanted it to, or maybe she was gaining an affection and fondness for Kay, for her companion Joe. This plausible and inevitable, almost obligatory, cultural nod to Spike Jonze's Her is very sweet, touching and indicative of how elastic our conception of consciousness could still be. Much like that 2013 film, which has aged depressively well, actually. So characters are quite good, usually, although I don't think Jared Leto is really good in anything, or much. I don't love his presence in this film, predictably. But on the production side, what then? I will say, if Vangelis was still alive, bring him back, or get Trent Reznor, or Eno, just keep it away from the boring Hans Zimmer. I mean, the score is pretty good, but at its best when it is quoting the originals, obviously. The cinematography in general, the neon lights being CGI doesn't work. Blade Runner wasn't neon. It wasn't saturated. It was too dystopian for even that. It was garage neon at best. I'm being pedantic, but if I wasn't, there'd be no more appreciation of what 1992's rather, Blade Runner did, which was so special, unique, different, and extraordinary. If we want to attack this film on plot hole grounds, it doesn't make much sense that Kay can keep any or many secrets from either the authorities or from the Wallace Corp. If they are indeed more powerful than the authoritative state, Blade Runner 1982 is implied to be something of an Orwellian police state. It is implied that Deckard is being watched at all times by GAF or by the department in general. Why are any characters ever doing anything without someone knowing about it in 2049? Except in special cases in Blade Runner 1982/92, JF's old building isn't surveyed, the four renegade replicants can hide in plain sight, sometimes, among the proles. But how often can a character operate without being watched in Blade Runner 1982/92? They know Rachel is with Deckard. Gaff even left the origami outside just after he went in to check if she was alive. Deckard, not important really, but Love breaks into so many places without being caught until Kay catches up with her vehicle at the end, when it's convenient for them to. Okay, yes, the film is brilliant. The investigation, the discovery of the wooden horse, the dynamic, arresting fight scene among the flooding waves, the splashing acting as the score, whereas the traditional score is a supplementary ambience. There are so many moments of film magic amongst the runtime of Blade Runner 2049, but it is reliant, dependent on the original, and it is not the original, it never will be, and it does not truly come remotely close to it. Yes, Assessing is its own thing, brilliant in its own right, seriously, but it is not Blade Runner, and maybe that was for the better. Maybe it was impossible to match the original, but I can't not point this out. So still somehow, I still really do appreciate, even quite love this film, but it is not what I dreamed of. I didn't expect it to be. to be clear. And my vision in dreams may be impossible, honestly, inevitably. But what we get, the compromise, is all the same an extraordinary accomplishment. I'll accept the story of Deckard and Rachel's kid, the replicant baby. Its cinematographic 2010's attempt to match Blade Runner is still one of the most impressive end results in that decade's cinematic science fiction, although not overly adventurous. Its script just fiddles around in a Blade Runner essay, and not the best one you've ever read either, but a decent one, underneath a CGI recreation of Blade Runner's art design, although the fact that they thought that this could equal or supersede the original film without putting even a iota of the effort that the original film put into it, not even close, is utter hubris and completely laughable, sad to say. Still, somehow, a possibly spectacular motion picture.